Hey there, welcome back. Give me a comment, where are you from and what kind of stories would you like to see?
My name is Claire, and if you're listening to this, you're probably wondering how a woman who was told she was too dumb to balance a checkbook ended up owning the empire of the man who said it. Grab your coffee. This is going to be a long night. And if you like what you hear, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this story, it only gets darker before the light breaks through. I was 26 when I met Richard Vance. He was 32, sharp-suited with a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, and a voice that made every room feel smaller. I was working as an administrative assistant at a mid-tier logistics firm in Chicago, making $42,000 a year, living in a studio apartment with a futon and a dream that I couldn't quite name yet. Richard was a junior partner at a venture capital firm. He drove a silver Mercedes. He wore watches that cost more than my car. And when he looked at me, I felt seen for the first time in my life. We met at a charity gala. I wasn't supposed to be there. My boss had the flu, and I was sent to represent the company with a stack of business cards and a dress I'd bought on clearance. I was standing by the shrimp cocktail, trying to look like I belonged, when Richard appeared beside me. He didn't ask what I did. He asked what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to run my own business someday. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had already decided I was cute for trying. "That's adorable, Claire," he said. "But let's be honest, you're not exactly MBA material." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. We started dating 2 weeks later. He was charming when he wanted to be. He opened doors, he sent flowers, he took me to restaurants where the menus didn't have prices. But there was always an edge to his charm. A little comment here, a subtle correction there. I mentioned wanting to take a business course at the community college. He patted my hand and said, "Sweetheart, let's not waste money on things you'll never use." I talked about a promotion at work. He said, "You're great at what you do, Claire. But leadership requires a certain intellectual capacity. You're more of a support person. And that's okay. The world needs support people." I should have left then. I know that now. But I was 26, and I was in love with the idea that someone like Richard Vance could love someone like me. So I stayed. And I shrank. I stopped talking about my dreams. I stopped reading business books. I let him pick my clothes, my hairstyle, my friends. I became the woman he wanted me to be. Small, grateful, dependent. We got married on a Saturday in June. His mother cried. My mother looked worried. I told myself it was just nerves. The first year was fine. The second year, the comments got sharper. The third year, they became weapons. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I had just finished making his favorite, beef bourguignon, a recipe I'd spent 3 hours on. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and someone else's perfume. I didn't ask about the perfume. I never asked. I just set the table and waited for him to sit down. He didn't. He stood in the doorway of our kitchen, in the house I'd decorated, in the life I'd built around him, and he looked at me with something that wasn't quite disgust. It was worse. It was pity. "I got a call from the bank today," he said. I froze. "What?" "Your credit card. You spent $800 at Nordstrom." "It was the gala, Richard. You said I needed a new dress." "I said you needed to look presentable, not like you're trying to compete with women who actually have taste." I felt the heat rise in my face. "I'm sorry. I'll return it." "You'll return it," he repeated, like he was talking to a child. "Claire, do you even understand how money works? Do you understand that every dollar you spend is a dollar I earned? That I built everything we have? That without me, you'd be nothing?" "I know, Richard. I appreciate everything you appreciate." He laughed. It was a harsh sound, like breaking glass. "You don't appreciate anything. You don't even understand anything. You're too dumb to understand, too dumb to run a business, too dumb to manage money, too dumb to do anything except stand there and look pretty, And frankly, you're not even doing that very well anymore. He picked up his plate, my grandmother's china, the one thing I'd brought into this marriage, and he threw it against the wall. It shattered. So did something inside me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the bathroom with the door locked, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She was thin in the wrong places, tired in all of them. Her eyes were empty. Her shoulders were hunched like she was waiting for the next blow. And I thought, is this who I am? Is this who I want to be when I'm 40? 50? When I'm dying, will I look back and be grateful that I was too dumb to try? I didn't leave the next morning, or the next week. I played the part. I smiled at his friends. I hosted his dinners. I pretended not to notice the perfume or the late nights or the way he looked through me like I was furniture. But something had changed. I was no longer Claire, the woman who loved Richard Vance. I was Claire, the woman who was going to destroy him. It started small. I opened a secret bank account at a different bank, using my maiden name and a P.O. box. I started saving every dollar I could skim from the household budget. $5 here, 20 there. Richard never noticed. He was too busy being important to notice anything about me. I told him I was taking a yoga class on Saturday mornings. Instead, I was at the library, reading every business book I could find. The Lean Startup. Good to Great. The hard thing about hard things. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know that I wasn't too dumb. I was too untrained. And training was something I could fix. 6 months after the plate throwing incident, I applied to the MBA program at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. I didn't tell Richard. I used my secret savings to pay the application fee. I wrote my essays in the library, on a laptop I'd bought with cash. I told the admissions committee about a woman who had been told she was too dumb, who had believed it, who was finally ready to stop believing. I got the acceptance letter on a Thursday. It came to the P.O. box. I opened it in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, and I cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was happy, because I was angry. Angry that it had taken me so long. Angry that I'd let him steal 3 years of my life. Angry that I had almost believed him. I told Richard that night. We were in the living room. He was reading the Wall Street Journal, a glass of scotch in his hand. I placed the acceptance letter on the coffee table in front of him. He didn't look at it. He looked at me, and his expression was the same one he'd had at the gala, the smile of a man who had already decided I was cute for trying. An MBA? He said. Claire, be serious. I am serious, Richard. I start in September. With what money? I've saved, and I'll take out loans. Loans? He laughed. You'll be in debt for a degree that won't get you a job making half of what I make. This is ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. I'm not asking for your permission, Richard. I'm telling you what I'm doing. He set down his glass. Very slowly. Very carefully. Then he stood up. He was 6'2", and he used every inch of it to tower over me. Let me make something very clear, he said. His voice was quiet. That was always worse than when he yelled. You are my wife. You live in my house. You spend my money. If you think you're going to embarrass me by playing student at some overpriced daycare for adults, you are mistaken. You will decline that acceptance. You will forget this nonsense. And you will apologize for wasting my time. I looked up at him. I thought about the plate against the wall. I thought about the perfume. I thought about every time he'd called me sweetheart like it was a synonym for stupid. No, I said. It was the first time I'd ever said no to him. He hit me. Not hard enough to leave a mark where it would show. He was too smart for that. He backhanded me across the face and I stumbled backward into the bookshelf. A vase fell. It didn't break. I wished it had. I wished something would break. Because I was afraid that if nothing broke, I would. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at him, and I said, I'm leaving. You'll be back, he said. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing. You're nothing. I packed a bag that night. One bag. I left the dresses, the jewelry, the life. I took my books, my laptop, and the acceptance letter. I drove to a motel on the highway, paid in cash, and sat on the edge of the bed until the sun came up. The next morning, I called my mother. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just said, "Come home, baby. Come home and breathe." I stayed with her for 2 weeks. Then I found a studio apartment in Evanston, near the Kellogg campus. It was 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed and a hot plate. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever lived, because it was mine. Richard called once. He left a voicemail. "You're making a mistake, Claire. A very expensive, very stupid mistake. But when you're ready to come to your senses, you know where to find me." I deleted it. I changed my number. And I started school. The first semester was hell. I was 30 years old, surrounded by 24-year-olds who had gone to Ivy League schools and interned at Goldman Sachs. I didn't know the jargon. I didn't understand the case studies. I sat in the back of every classroom, taking notes until my hand cramped, then going home and studying until my eyes burned. I failed my first accounting exam. I got a C- on my first marketing paper. I called my mother at 2 in the morning, crying, convinced that Richard was right, that I was too dumb, that I had wasted everything. She said, "Baby, a C- is not an F. A C- is a beginning. Keep going." I kept going. I found a study group. I made friends with a woman named Priya who had worked at McKinsey and didn't treat me like I was stupid. I got a tutor for accounting. I rewrote the marketing paper 3 times. By the end of the first year, I had a 3.4 GPA. By the end of the second year, I had a 3.7 and a job offer from a private equity firm in New York. I didn't take the New York job. I took a job in Chicago, at a mid-sized firm that specialized in distressed assets. The pay was less. The hours were worse. But I was learning how to break companies down and build them back up. I was learning how to read balance sheets like they were confessions. I was learning that Richard Vance, for all his swagger, was not a very good businessman. He took too many risks. He leveraged too heavily. He treated his company like a trophy instead of a machine. I watched him from a distance, not stalking, just observing, reading his press releases, studying his SEC filings. I knew his company, Vance Capital Partners, better than he did. I knew where the bodies were buried. I knew which investments were propped up with debt. I knew that one bad quarter would start a domino chain that not even his charm could stop. It took 5 years. 5 years of working 80-hour weeks. 5 years of eating ramen in my apartment while I saved every bonus, every raise, every stock option. 5 years of watching Richard marry a 25-year-old model and parade her around at charity events, telling everyone how his first wife had a little breakdown. Poor thing, just wasn't cut out for the real world. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate would have been a waste of energy. I just waited. I built my network. I made connections with banks, with investors, with the kind of people who didn't care about charm, only returns. I became known as the woman who could turn around a failing company in 6 months. I became known as someone who didn't sleep, didn't quit, didn't miss. And then, in my 5th year out of Kellogg, Richard's domino fell. It was a real estate investment, a luxury condo development in Miami. He'd leveraged everything: his company, his personal assets, his investors' money, on the promise that the market would keep rising. It didn't. The market crashed. The condos sat empty. The debt came due. Vance Capital Partners was in trouble. Serious trouble. The kind of trouble that makes bankers nervous and vultures circle. I was ready. I spent 6 months putting together a consortium. I found investors who trusted me, who knew my track record. I raised $40 million. I didn't tell anyone who the target was. I just said it was a distressed asset with significant upside potential if managed correctly. The day before the auction, I flew back to Chicago. I hadn't been back in 3 years. I stayed at a hotel downtown, under a different name. I didn't want Richard to know I was in town. I didn't want him to have any warning. The auction was at a law firm on LaSalle Street. I wore a navy suit. I carried a leather portfolio. I sat in the back of the conference room while the other bidders, mostly private equity firms and hedge funds, sized each other up. Richard was there. He looked older, thinner. The swagger was still there, but it was fraying at the edges. He was representing his own company, trying to find a white knight, someone who would save him from himself. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was 40 years old now. My hair was different. My posture was different. I carried myself like someone who had never been told she was too dumb for anything. The bidding started. It was a fire sale. Vance Capital Partners was being sold for pennies on the dollar. The other bidders dropped out one by one as they realized how much debt they would be absorbing. I stayed in. I raised my paddle calmly, steadily, like I was buying a piece of furniture instead of a man's life. When the gavel fell, I had won. I owned Vance Capital Partners. I owned Richard's company. I owned the empire he had told me I was too dumb to understand. The room emptied. Richard stayed behind. He was talking to his lawyer, his voice rising, his hands shaking. This is a mistake. There has to be a mistake. Who is this bidder? I demand to know who. I stood up. I walked toward him. I didn't hurry. I didn't hesitate. I just walked. In my navy suit. With my leather portfolio. And I stopped 3 feet away from the man who had called me too dumb. "Hello, Richard," I said. He turned. He looked at me, and I watched the recognition crawl across his face like a spider. Slowly, painfully. He went pale, then red, then something between anger and fear. "Claire," he whispered. "Mrs. Vance," I corrected, though I hadn't been Mrs. Vance in a decade. Or, as of about 5 minutes ago, your new boss. You. He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked at his lawyer, who was staring at the floor. He looked at the empty chairs where the other bidders had sat. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, Richard Vance had nothing to say. "I read your financials," I said. "You made some interesting choices, Richard. The Miami condos were ambitious, but you leveraged at 60%. That's not ambition. That's hubris. And hubris, as it turns out, is very expensive." "You don't know what you're doing," he said. But his voice was shaking. "You don't understand this business. You never understood anything. You're going to run it into the ground." I smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been waiting 10 years to smile exactly this way. "Richard," I said, "I graduated top 10% from Kellogg. I've turned around 12 companies in 5 years. I have a network that includes 3 former Treasury secretaries and the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And I just bought your company for $40 million that I raised in 6 months. Tell me again how I'm too dumb to understand." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. "I'll tell you what I'm going to do," I continued. "I'm going to liquidate the Miami assets. I'm going to restructure the debt. I'm going to fire about 30% of your staff, mostly the ones you hired because they were your drinking buddies instead of because they were competent. And then, Richard, I'm going to sell this company for 3 times what I paid for it, because unlike you, I know how to build something that lasts." "You can't do this," he said. But he was whispering now. "I already have." I turned to his lawyer. "Mr. Patterson, please have all of Mr. Vance's personal effects removed from the executive suite by end of day. He no longer has an office here. He no longer has a title. He is, effectively, unemployed." "Claire," Richard said. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. It sounded almost like begging. "Claire, we were married. We loved each other. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at him. I thought about the plate against the wall. I thought about the perfume. I thought about every sweetheart and too dumb and you're nothing. "It meant everything," I said, "until you made it mean nothing." I turned and walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I had spent 10 years learning not to look back. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. Not because of the work was what I was born to do, but because every day I had to walk into that building, sit in that office, and know that the ghost of who I used to be was hovering in every corner. I fired his friends. I restructured his deals. I erased his name from the letterhead and replaced it with mine. Richard tried to fight back. He sued me for something. I don't even remember what. Emotional distress, maybe. Or unfair business practices. His lawyer dropped the case when he realized Richard couldn't pay him. Richard's new wife left him when the money dried up. Last I heard, he was living in a rental apartment in the suburbs, working as a consultant for a firm that mostly didn't return his calls. I didn't celebrate his downfall. That was the surprising thing. I thought I would feel triumph. I thought I would feel vindication. But when I sat in that corner office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, all I felt was quiet. A deep, exhausted quiet, like the silence after a storm has finally passed. I sold Vance Capital Partners, renamed Hartwell Capital, 18 months after I bought it. The sale price was $120 million. My investors made 3 times their money. I made enough to never work again. But I kept working. Because work was no longer about revenge. It was about proof. Proof that I was never too dumb. Proof that the only thing standing between me and everything I wanted was the lie I'd been told, and the lie I'd been foolish enough to believe. I started a foundation for women leaving abusive relationships. We provide housing, education grants, legal support. We tell them, you are not too dumb, you are not too weak, you are not too anything, you are just beginning. I met someone 2 years ago. His name is David. He's a professor of economics at the University of Chicago. He has kind eyes and a laugh that doesn't have an edge. He doesn't call me sweetheart. He calls me brilliant. He means it. We're getting married next spring. Small ceremony. Just family and friends. My mother will cry. David's daughter from his first marriage will be the flower girl. And I will walk down the aisle not as the woman who was too dumb, but as the woman who proved that the only person who gets to decide what you're capable of is you. Richard sent me a letter last month. I don't know how he got my address. It was 3 pages of apology, of explanation, of, I was going through a hard time, and, I didn't mean what I said, and, can we talk just once, for old time's sake? I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say, 10 years ago, in a conference room on LaSalle Street, wearing a navy suit and a smile that wasn't kind. Some people will tell you that revenge is empty, that it doesn't fill the hole inside you. They're half right. Revenge doesn't fill the hole. But it does something almost as important. It proves that the hole can be filled. It proves that you're not broken beyond repair. It proves that the person who tried to destroy you didn't understand the first thing about who you really are. I was never too dumb. I was never too weak. I was just too loyal to the wrong person, for too long. And the moment I stopped being loyal to him and started being loyal to myself, everything changed. If you're listening to this and someone is telling you that you're too something, too dumb, too weak, too old, too broken, I want you to hear me clearly. They are lying. They are lying because your potential terrifies them. Your potential threatens the little kingdom they've built on your back. And the only way they can keep you small is to convince you that small is all you deserve. It's not. It's never been. And the day you decide to stop believing them is the day your real life begins. I'm Claire Hartwell. I was told I was too dumb to run a business. I now run 3. I was told I was nothing without the man who built everything. I built more. I was told I'd come crawling back. I never looked back. And if you're still in that kitchen, with the plate shattered against the wall and the voice in your head telling you that you deserve this, I'm here to tell you that you don't. You deserve everything. And the only person who can give it to you is the one staring back from the mirror. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. And remember, the only thing too dumb is believing someone else's lie about your worth. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong.